They threw my belongings on the lawn like I was nothing. My own family called me worthless, a burden they couldn't wait to get rid of. What they didn't know was that my quiet husband wasn't just any man. He owned half the city, including the house they thought was theirs. Before we dive into this incredible story of revenge and justice, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you won't believe how this family's greed backfired in the most spectacular way possible. My name is Hazel, and 3 years ago I thought I had found my fairy tale. I married Ben in a small ceremony that my family barely showed up to. They said he was too quiet, too ordinary, but when he looked at me, I felt like I was the only person in the world that mattered. We moved into my childhood home with my parents because, honestly, we couldn't afford our own place yet. At least that's what I thought. Ben worked in business. That's all he ever said when people asked. He'd leave early in the morning wearing simple clothes and come back in the evening with this gentle smile that made my day brighter. My family saw his humility as weakness. They saw his quietness as boring. But I saw something different in his eyes, a depth that made me feel safe, like he was carrying secrets that would one day make sense. Living with my family wasn't easy. My sister Lucy was the golden child, a real estate agent who drove a shiny car and wore designer clothes. She had this way of walking into a room like she owned it, and honestly, my parents acted like she did. Then there was my brother Mike, the artist who spent most days in the garage painting canvases that never seemed to sell, but even his failures were somehow more interesting to my parents than my quiet life with Ben. I worked part-time at a local bookstore, which gave my family endless material for their criticism. "When are you going to get a real job, Hazel?" my mother would ask during dinner, while Lucy talked about her latest property sale. "When is Ben going to step up and provide for you properly?" my father would add, barely looking up from his plate. Ben would just squeeze my hand under the table, never defending himself, never arguing back. Sometimes I wished he would fight for us, but that wasn't who he was. The real tension started when Lucy announced her engagement to Richard, some wealthy guy from the city who owned multiple businesses. Suddenly, the house felt different. There were whispered conversations in corners, planning sessions that stopped when I walked into rooms. Lucy started talking about wedding preparations, about needing space for her new life, about how cramped everything felt with so many people living under one roof. I caught my parents having hushed conversations about making changes and what's best for the family's future. When I tried to join these discussions, they'd smile and change the subject, treating me like a child who couldn't understand adult decisions. But I understood perfectly. I could see it in their eyes. I was the problem they needed to solve. Ben noticed the shift, too. He'd find me crying after particularly harsh family dinners and hold me without saying a word. Sometimes I wondered if he felt as unwelcome as I did, but he never complained. He'd just stroke my hair and whisper that everything would be okay. Looking back now, I think he knew something I didn't. There was this calm confidence about him that I mistook for acceptance of our situation. The breaking point was coming, and I could feel it building like storm clouds gathering overhead, dark and heavy with the promise of something that would change everything forever. The storm finally broke on a Tuesday morning. I was making coffee when my parents walked into the kitchen with that look, the one that said they'd made a decision about my life without including me in it. Lucy stood behind them, arms crossed, wearing that smug expression she'd perfected since childhood. Mike lingered in the doorway, avoiding eye contact like he always did when things got uncomfortable. "Hazel, we need to talk," my father said, his voice carrying that tone he used when he thought he was being reasonable but was really just being cruel. My mother nodded beside him, wringing her hands in a way that might have looked apologetic if I didn't know better. "Lucy's getting married, and she's going to need this space. You and Ben need to find your own place." The coffee mug slipped from my hands, shattering against the kitchen floor. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "This is my home too," I whispered, but even as I said it, I could see in their faces that it wasn't. Not anymore. Maybe it never really had been. "Lucy's successful," my father continued, stepping around the broken ceramic like it was just another mess I'd made. "She's got a real future ahead of her. She needs room to build her life with Richard. You're 28, Hazel. It's time you and Ben figured things out for yourselves." The words hit me like physical blows. Lucy started talking about redecorating my childhood bedroom for her engagement party, discussing paint colors and furniture arrangements as if I was already gone. Ben was at work, unreachable as always during his mysterious business hours. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. "Ben, please call me back," I said, my voice breaking. "Something's happening, and I need you." But the silence on the other end felt as empty as the future my family was painting for me. They gave me 48 hours. 48 hours to pack up a lifetime and figure out where to go. I spent that first day crying in my room while Lucy measured the walls and talked to contractors about knocking down the wall between my room and Mike's to create a larger space for her new life. Mike, to his credit, looked uncomfortable with the whole thing, but not uncomfortable enough to speak up for me. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of voices in the hallway. Lucy was showing Richard around, pointing out where they'd put their new furniture, discussing their plans like I was already just a memory. "This will be perfect for entertaining," she said, her voice bright with excitement. "Much better than having it cluttered with people who aren't really contributing to the household." I spent the day desperately calling friends, trying to find someone who could help us, somewhere we could stay. But most of my friends had moved away or started their own families. The few who remained offered couches for a night or two. Nothing permanent. The reality of my situation settled over me like a heavy blanket. I had nowhere to go. When Ben finally came home that evening, I threw myself into his arms and sobbed. He held me tight, but there was something different about his embrace, a tension I'd never felt before. "I tried to call you," I said through my tears. "Where were you? Why couldn't I reach you?" "I'm sorry," he said quietly, stroking my hair. "I was in meetings all day. Important ones. I couldn't step away." There was something in his voice, a weight I didn't understand. "Don't worry about this, Hazel. I'll handle it." But how could he handle it? We had barely any savings, no real plan, and my family had made it clear we weren't welcome. That night, I lay awake listening to Lucy and Richard laughing in the living room, making wedding plans in the house where I'd grown up, and I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. The final morning came faster than I expected. I woke up to find my belongings being carried out of the house. Not by professional movers, but by my own family members, treating my possessions like unwanted clutter at a garage sale. My clothes were stuffed into garbage bags, my books thrown into cardboard boxes without any care for their condition. "What are you doing?" I screamed, running outside in my pajamas. Neighbors had started to gather, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Peterson from next door stood on her porch, shaking her head with what looked like genuine sympathy. The Martinez family across the street watched from their window, probably grateful it wasn't their drama being played out for the whole street to see. "We told you 48 hours, my father said, not even looking at me as he carried out my dresser drawers. "Time's up, Hazel. Lucy's contractors are coming this afternoon to start the renovations." I stood there on the front lawn, surrounded by my life in boxes and bags, and felt something break inside me. Not just my heart, that had been breaking for days. Something deeper. My sense of belonging, my understanding of family, my belief that blood meant something more than convenience and favoritism. Mike finally spoke up, but his words cut deeper than his silence had. "You should have seen this coming, Hazel. Ben can't even afford to buy you nice things. How did you think this was going to work out?" He gestured at my pile of belongings. "Maybe this is the wake-up call you both needed." The neighbors were staring now. Some with pity, others with the kind of curiosity that comes from watching someone else's life fall apart. I sat down on my suitcase, right there on the front lawn, and cried. Not the quiet tears I'd been shedding for days, but the kind of sobbing that comes from losing everything you thought was solid in your world. That's when I heard the car pulling up, Ben's voice calling my name, and everything, absolutely everything, was about to change. Ben stepped out of his usual modest sedan, and for a moment, everything went quiet. Even my family stopped their packing to look at him. There was something different about the way he carried himself, not the defeated posture of a man watching his life crumble, but the confident stride of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. "What happened here?" he asked quietly, his voice steady as he took in the scene. My belongings scattered across the lawn, my family standing around like they were cleaning up after a natural disaster, me sitting in the middle of it all like the last survivor of something terrible. "Ben," my father said, trying to sound reasonable, "we explained the situation to Hazel. You two need to move on with your lives. This is what's best for everyone." Ben walked over to me, helped me to my feet, and wiped the tears from my cheeks with the kind of gentleness that made me fall in love with him in the first place. Then he turned to my family, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but a kind of cold certainty that made my breath catch. "You're right," he said calmly. "This is what's best for everyone." He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Hi, it's Benjamin. We need to talk. Bring the papers." He listened for a moment, then added, "Yes, all of them. We're at the house." Lucy laughed, actually laughed. "What papers, Ben?" "What are you going to do? Call the police? We own this house. Hazel grew up here, but that doesn't give you any rights." Ben just smiled, a small, knowing smile that should have been a warning to all of them. "You're absolutely right, Lucy. Growing up somewhere doesn't give you ownership." He slipped his phone back into his pocket. "Legal ownership is what matters." Within minutes, black sedans started pulling up to the curb. Not police cars, but expensive vehicles with tinted windows. Men in tailored suits stepped out, carrying briefcases and looking like they meant business. The neighbors who had been watching from a safe distance suddenly seemed very interested in finding reasons to go back inside their houses. The lead man approached us with the kind of confidence that comes from handling important matters for important people. He was tall, distinguished, with gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent his career in boardrooms rather than courtrooms, though he clearly knew his way around both. "Mr. Hart," he said, extending his hand to Ben. "I came as soon as you called." "Mr. Hart." I stared at Ben, confusion mixing with the beginnings of something that felt like hope. I'd never heard anyone call him anything but Ben. Even his mail came addressed to Benjamin, never Hart with any kind of title or formality that suggested, what was I even thinking? "Thank you for coming so quickly, Patterson," Ben replied, shaking the man's hand. "I think we need to clear up some confusion about property ownership." My father stepped forward, puffing up his chest the way he did when he felt challenged. "Now look here. We don't know who you think you are, but this is our family home. We've lived here for over 20 years. Patterson opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with documents. "Actually, sir, this property has been owned by Hart Industries for the past 5 years. The previous owners sold it during the 2020 market downturn." He handed my father a document. "As you can see, the sale was completed in full, and the property has been maintained as a rental property since then." Lucy grabbed the papers from my father's hands, her face going pale as she read. "Hart Industries," she whispered, and I could see recognition dawning in her eyes. "Hart Industries, that's the real estate empire. They own half the buildings downtown." Ben nodded calmly. "Among other things, yes." "But you're just Ben," Mike said, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "You're quiet Ben who works in business and can't afford to buy Hazel nice things." "I am Ben," my husband replied, his voice gentler now. "I'm also Benjamin Hart, CEO of Hart Industries, and I can afford to buy Hazel anything she wants. I just wanted her to love me for who I am, not what I have." Patterson continued as if he was reading from a grocery list rather than destroying my family's entire understanding of their situation. The property was purchased as a wedding gift for Mrs. Hart, with the understanding that her family would be allowed to remain as tenants indefinitely, provided they treated the actual owners with appropriate respect. I felt the world tilt sideways. "Wedding gift?" I whispered. Ben took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm the way he did when he was nervous. "I wanted to surprise you on our anniversary. The house was supposed to be yours, Hazel. I bought it because I knew how much this place meant to you, how many memories you had here." My mother sank into one of the lawn chairs someone had dragged outside, her face white as paper. "You own our house," she said, not really a question. "I own this house," Ben corrected gently. "I own this entire block, actually, and the one behind it, and most of the commercial district downtown." He gestured to Patterson. "Show them the neighborhood overview." Patterson produced another document, this one showing a map of our area with properties highlighted in blue. Nearly everything was blue. The grocery store where I bought our weekly supplies, the coffee shop where Lucy met her clients, the art supply store where Mike bought his paints, all of it owned by Hart Industries, owned by my quiet, humble husband who let my family treat him like he was nothing. 5 years, my father said, staring at the papers. You've owned our house for 5 years and you never said anything? Ben's expression was patient, but there was steel underneath it now. You've been living in my house for 5 years, treating your daughter like she was a burden and your son-in-law like he was worthless, and you never thought to be grateful. The silence that followed was the kind that comes right before everything falls apart completely. Lucy looked like she was about to be sick. Mike had gone completely pale, probably calculating every cruel thing he'd said about Ben over the years. My parents just stared at the documents like they could somehow make them say something different. But I was looking at my husband, really looking at him, and seeing him clearly for the first time. The quiet confidence I'd always found attractive suddenly made perfect sense. The way he never seemed worried about money, the mysterious business meetings, the calm way he handled every crisis. He wasn't just getting by in the world, he was running a significant part of it. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice barely audible over the sound of my family's world crashing down around us. Because I wanted you to choose me, he said simply. Not my money, not my company, not what I could give you, just me. And in that moment, standing in the middle of the wreckage of my old life, I realized that I had chosen him. Every day for 3 years, I had chosen the man I thought was just Ben, never knowing he was also Benjamin Hart. I had loved him when I thought he had nothing, which meant I had loved him for all the right reasons. It was my family who had gotten everything wrong. The transformation in my family's behavior was immediate and nauseating. My father, who had been carrying my belongings to the curb like garbage just minutes before, suddenly stepped forward with his hand extended and a smile that looked like it physically hurt to produce. Ben, Mr. Hart, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding here, he said, his voice taking on the obsequious tone he used with his most important clients. If we had known who you were, of course we would have handled this situation differently. Ben looked at my father's outstretched hand but didn't take it. You knew exactly who I was, he said quietly. I was your daughter's husband. That should have been enough. Lucy stepped forward, her real estate agent's smile in full force despite the panic in her eyes. This is actually perfect timing, she said, her voice brittle with false cheer. Richard and I are having our engagement party here next week. Having the actual owner present would be such an honor. Maybe we could discuss some business opportunities. No, Ben said, the single word cutting through her babbling like a knife. You're not having an engagement party here next week. You're not having anything here. He turned to Patterson. What's the standard notice period for eviction in this state? 24 hours for lease violation, sir, Patterson replied without hesitation. Or immediate removal for destruction of property or hostile behavior toward the owner. My mother finally found her voice, though it came out as a panicked whisper. Eviction? Ben, surely you don't mean we're family. We can work this out. Are we family? Ben asked, his tone genuinely curious. Because family doesn't throw their daughter's belongings on the lawn. Family doesn't humiliate someone they love in front of the entire neighborhood. Family doesn't call someone worthless because they don't drive an expensive car or wear designer clothes. Mike, who had been silent since the revelation, finally spoke up. Ben, I'm sorry, man, I didn't know. You didn't know what? Ben interrupted, his calm facade cracking slightly. You didn't know I was wealthy, so you thought it was okay to treat me like dirt? You didn't know I owned this house, so it was fine to kick your sister out of it? He shook his head. The only thing you didn't know was that your cruelty would have consequences. The neighbors had started creeping back outside, drawn by the drama unfolding on our front lawn. Mrs. Peterson was barely pretending to water her flowers while she listened to every word. The Martinez family had given up all pretense and were watching openly from their porch. Lucy's face was burning red, probably thinking about how this would look to Richard and her real estate colleagues. Patterson cleared his throat professionally. Mr. Hart, shall I proceed with the eviction notice? Ben looked at me, and I saw the question in his eyes. This was my family, awful as they were being. This was my childhood home, even if it hadn't felt like home for a long time. The decision was mine to make. I thought about all the times they had made me feel small, all the comments about my choices, all the ways they had dismissed both Ben and me. I thought about sitting on that suitcase 20 minutes ago, crying while they threw my life away. I thought about Lucy planning to redecorate my room while I was still living in it, and Mike calling Ben a nobody, and my parents deciding my future without including me in the conversation. 24 hours, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Give them 24 hours. My family's relief was visible, but it was short-lived. 24 hours to pack and leave, I continued. The lease agreement is terminated for hostile behavior toward the property owners. Lucy's engagement party was scheduled for the following Saturday, 6 days away. She had already sent invitations, booked caterers, ordered flowers. Richard's family was flying in from out of state. The thought of having to call everyone and explain why the party was canceled, why she no longer had access to the house she'd been bragging about, it was written all over her face. "Hazel, please," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm your sister. This is just a misunderstanding. We can fix this." "You had 3 years to treat me like your sister," I replied. 3 years to be kind to my husband. 3 years to make me feel welcome in the house where I grew up. Instead, you spent 3 years making me feel like a failure and 3 days planning my eviction. Mike tried a different approach. "What about my art? All my paintings are in the garage. Some of them are for my upcoming show." "The show at the downtown gallery?" Ben asked mildly. "The one in the building owned by Hart Industries? The one where you got the exhibition slot because the gallery director owed me a favor, though he didn't mention that when he called to tell me about the talented local artist whose work deserved a chance?" Mike's face went white. Even his failures had been successes only because of Ben's hidden influence. As my family scrambled to process this information, Ben walked over to where I was still standing among my scattered belongings. He picked up one of my books, a worn copy of Jane Austen that I'd read so many times the spine was cracked, and handed it to me. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, meant just for me. "I'm sorry I let it get this far. I kept thinking they'd come around, that they'd see how much we loved each other and start treating us with respect. I thought if I just stayed patient and kind, they'd eventually accept us." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked again, accepting the book and holding it against my chest like a shield. "About the house? About who you are?" "Because I wanted to earn your love," he said simply. "I've had people pretend to care about me for my money my whole life. When I met you, you saw me as just Ben, and you loved just Ben. That was the most precious thing anyone had ever given me." I understood then why he had hidden his wealth, why he had endured my family's treatment, why he had never defended himself when they called him boring or worthless. He had been protecting something rare and beautiful, a relationship built on love instead of greed, respect instead of opportunism. "I did love just Ben," I told him. "I still do. All of this," I gestured toward Patterson and the legal documents and the expensive cars, "doesn't change who you are to me." He smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from him in weeks. "So, what do you want to do?" "This is your house, Hazel. I bought it for you. We can live here or we can sell it or we can turn it into something completely different. Whatever you want." I looked around at the house where I'd grown up, at my family standing among the ruins of their assumptions, at the neighbors who were still watching our drama unfold. Too many bad memories now. Too much hurt to pretend we could just move forward like nothing had happened. "I want to sell it," I said. "Let's find somewhere that's just ours where we can start fresh." Ben nodded. "Patterson, please put the house on the market. Let's see what it's worth these days." "Actually, sir," Patterson said, consulting his tablet, "given the recent developments in the area and Hart Industries' plans for commercial expansion, I'd estimate this property has appreciated significantly, probably enough to provide the current tenants with a substantial relocation allowance should you choose to offer one." My family's heads snapped up at the mention of money, hope flickering in their eyes like dying embers finding oxygen. But Ben was looking at me again, waiting for my decision. "There's something else you should know," he said to my family, his voice carrying a weight I was only beginning to understand. For the past 3 years, I've been helping you financially, anonymously. Mike's art school tuition that he thought he'd gotten through a scholarship, my father's business loan that kept his company afloat during the pandemic, the mysterious benefactor who had paid for my mother's surgery last year when their insurance fell short, even Lucy's down payment on her car, which she thought came from a real estate bonus. I helped you because I loved Hazel and you were her family, Ben continued. I wanted her to be happy, and I knew she couldn't be truly happy if her family was struggling, so I made sure you weren't. The silence that followed was deafening. My family stood there, realizing that the man they had dismissed as worthless had been quietly supporting them for years. The man they had mocked for being poor had been the reason they weren't poor themselves. The real tragedy, Ben said, his voice infinitely sad, is that I would have continued helping you forever. All I wanted was for you to be kind to my wife. That was it. Just basic human decency toward the woman I love. Lucy started crying then, not the pretty tears she used to get her way, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone who finally understood what they had lost. Mike sank down onto the porch steps, his head in his hands. My parents just stared at Ben like they were seeing him for the first time. Ben? My father said, his voice breaking. Is there any way, can we somehow— You have 24 hours, Ben repeated gently. Patterson will be by tomorrow evening to ensure the property is vacated. Your security deposits will be returned, and I'll provide moving expenses as a final courtesy. After that, our business relationship is concluded. He took my hand and started walking toward his car. Our car, I realized. Our life that I was finally starting to understand. Where are we going? I asked as he opened the passenger door for me. Home, he said. Our real home. The one I've been working on as a surprise for our anniversary. The one that's just ours, where no one can make you feel unwelcome ever again. As we drove away, I looked back once at the house where I grew up, at my family standing among the scattered pieces of their old life, at the neighbors already spreading the story that would be told at dinner tables across the neighborhood for years to come. But mostly, I looked at my husband, my quiet, patient, secretly powerful husband, and realized that sometimes the people who seem ordinary are hiding the most extraordinary love stories of all. The fairy tale I thought I'd lost had been there all along. I just hadn't known how to recognize it.